Today on Let's Talk Crimes, Frank will be talking to us about possession of marijuana. And before we start this episode, I'd like to thank Alejandro Castro for giving us this viewer submission. So Frank, tell us about possession of marijuana.
Good afternoon to Let's Talk Crime. I hope you guys have watched the previous episodes and we're kind of running into this topic as we go. Possession of marijuana is a very common charge in all cities of the United States, whether you're metropolitan or rural. The most common possession of marijuana charges is the possession of marijuana under. That's the language that you're going to hear. It's actually possession of marijuana under 20 grams of marijuana. The reason why they use the 20 grams, because the statute classifies that as the first marijuana possession charge. If you get charged with that, you're being charged with a misdemeanor offense. Remember my misdemeanor episode? What is a misdemeanor? You're punishable up to 1 year. In this case, that possession of marijuana under 20 grams is a first degree misdemeanor. You could be charged up to 1 year in a jail.
And do people ever really go to jail for possession of marijuana under 20 grams? Is it realistic that you end up in jail?
People can go to jail. That's why the statute says up to 1 year. Realistically, it's a very common charge, so people don't always go to jail. Now, I don't like to sit here and tell you you cannot go. I can think of a scenario where you may possibly go to jail on a possession of marijuana under. If you were charged, you were not able to negotiate it with the state, they offered you a program, pretrial diversion, you did not accept it, you felt that you were not guilty, and you end up in a trial in front of a jury, and you lose. Jury finds that you were guilty, even though it was a small amount. I could see that as realistically, you may have to do some jail time.
Okay, and are there any other consequences?
The other consequences of possession of marijuana under, and the other ones, which I will discuss, is that if you are adjudicated guilty, that means that you were found guilty by a judge, and he used the language adjudication. You may lose your license up to 2 years. You will lose your license. It will be revoked. The time frame could be from 6 months up to 2 years. The Department of Motor Vehicle will evaluate you, and depending on what they think your suspension time should be, that's what it will be.
Wow, that's crazy. And so even if I plead guilty, 2 year suspension on the license.
Even if you plead guilty and you're adjudicated guilty.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I tell you that, because sometimes the judge could use a language that most states have. It's called withhold adjudication. I'm sure that many of you have heard the language. There was a very respected judge here that used to describe it as a legal illusion, which means that you're pleading guilty to the charges and the judge is finding you guilty, but he's withholding the language of adjudication, which some of the consequences of a normal adjudication will not apply. In a misdemeanor case of possession of marijuana, one of those consequences that would not apply would be the license suspension.
And now, what happens if you get caught with over 20 grams?
Over 20 grams is a different statute. It now becomes a felony, and it's between 20 grams and 25 pounds of marijuana. That is a third-degree felony. You could be charged or you could be sentenced up to 5 years in state prison. It's a different charge by itself. It also takes the suspension for your license.
Okay, and over 25 pounds, which is a ridiculous amount.
As you say, it's not an uncommon charge. Yeah. The most common over 25 pounds marijuana charge is the typical grow house, where people are cultivating marijuana in their houses. When the police officers come into these houses, there's normally more than 25 pounds. That's a trafficking marijuana charge. It doesn't matter that they don't have evidence that you were indeed trafficking. It almost speaks for itself. 25 pounds is a trafficking amount. That's a 3-year minimum mandatory in state prison, folks. 3 years minimum mandatory. Does that mean that you're always going to be sentenced to 3 years? Not necessarily. If the state waives your right to the 3 years. But I can assure you that if you do not negotiate the case, you go to a jury trial and you lose, you're going to get at least 3 years, because it's a minimum mandatory that they can give you. Once the jury speaks and says that you're guilty, There's no more discretion. Less than 3 years is an unlawful sentence.
Right. And then nowadays they have synthetic marijuana like oils and things like that. Does the same laws apply to that with the 20 grams and everything?
Synthetic marijuana, it's never a misdemeanor. So keep that in mind. And that's a new crime. Synthetic marijuana hasn't been around forever. So possession of marijuana which is under 20 grams, does not apply to synthetic. Synthetic marijuana, any amount, you will be charged with a felony.
Wow. And, I want to ask you, what about medical marijuana licenses and things like that?
Medical marijuana, and you asked me before we started the program, and I'm going to edit a program just for medical marijuana. It's a very large and novel area of law. There's a lot of controversy on it, and I think it deserves one episode. I'm not going to promise to when it's going to be. I'm going to try to do an episode before the winter.
Okay, and this is actually a really important question. So does it all it takes for the cop to arrest you for marijuana, does he just have to smell it and he's allowed to go in and search your car and things like that? Or
the courts have said that an experienced officer who says that by his experience he smells the odor of what he feels is marijuana, it will give him enough to at least stop you, inquire, and even search you. Doesn't mean he's going to arrest you.
Okay.
But he will have sufficient, based on the order, to do that. And it happens very common. Let me tell you something about possession. And you hear this from clients all the time. Oh, they arrested me by possession, but we have a good case because I didn't have the marijuana on me. It doesn't matter. Possession doesn't mean that it has to be in your pocket all the time or on your body. Possession means that you have possession and or control over the marijuana. You could have it under the seat. You could have it under the passenger seat. People that sell marijuana, often they don't keep it in their bodies. They'll put it in a tree a few feet from them. When a buyer comes, they'll walk over to the tree. They're in possession of it because they're in control of that marijuana.
Okay, and then that actually leads me to my last question, the charge of possession with intent to sell.
Possession with intent to sell is a very common one when there's festivals, at football stadiums. When there's a lot of people, you get your local salesperson that goes with many baggies of marijuana, and he has singles because he needs to give people a cash. Possession of marijuana, different than what most people think, does not require a detective to have evidence that you were going to possess it with intent to sell. Circumstantially, you could prove that. If you have many baggies on you, you could have not too many grams, but they're divided in many baggies. That's consistent with somebody who sells. You can have many baggies on you, and you can have a wad of cash with a lot of singles. Those are circumstances that the detectives or the police officers can use to show that you were possessing it, but you were intending to sell it. And what's the difference? As I say when we started, it now becomes a felony. Because sale of marijuana is a felony.
No matter the amount.
No matter the amount.
Now,
just like synthetic marijuana is a felony, so is sale of marijuana.
Yeah. What if you get caught with like a paraphernalia, you have a bong in the car?
Paraphernalia of marijuana, obviously the officer has to make that call. But paraphernalia of marijuana is a misdemeanor charge. And you will be arrested, and people get arrested on a daily basis for that. Having a pipe, a bong, they have sometimes the little envelopes, but the envelopes are empty and there's some residue left. Right. That's paraphernalia. You can and you will be arrested.
All right. Well, I think we covered everything. All the basics for possession of marijuana.
That was a good topic. And just quickly, marijuana sometimes it became so common in our society that, and now with these news coming up, there's a misconception out there that it's legal. Folks, in the state of Florida, marijuana has not been decriminalized. It's a crime. You will get arrested. It's a Schedule I drug. It's a serious offense. Whether some states have legalized it or not, Florida has not. The federal system has not either. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was a great topic, and I hope that you don't only watch the episode and learn. I hope that you think to yourself, I don't want to get arrested. Have a great afternoon.
What you gonna do when they come for